Okay, guys, make sure that you made a title or a new heading for Chapter 11, Section 1 notes. It should go after your terms and machines assignment that you had for today. We are going to talk about the Industrial Revolution today and the new factory system. And we talked about one of the effects of the War of 1812 was that it brought a great change in manufacturing as far as it started to grow in the United States because trading was stopped during the war, thus making people have to start to create their own goods. So that's why that grew. And so that brought a lot of economic changes in our country. During the Industrial Revolution, which is going to be this time period, factory machines started replacing people by using those simple hand tools. Manufacturing and industry started to replace farming as the main form of work. And so you probably have read through and looked at the new inventions that have been made. And this new factory system is where you bring all these workers under one roof and they work together. And you're familiar with factories because we still have them today. So I'm going to put up a question here about Thomas Jefferson and the factory system. I want you to write out the question and take your time here answering it. I want you to make sure you look through this section about it, but the answer is not necessarily going to be in there because you have to think about Thomas Jefferson as a president and his philosophy and why he would or would not like the factory system. Before you so go ahead and pause it, Paul, but before you play it again, why don't you guys discuss the answer to this question, and then I'll shout out some answers too here. Alright, obviously Thomas Jefferson would not like this system, and he did not want the country to industrialize. His philosophy, if you remember, was to have people living the common way of life, people living in the more as farmers, and rural type of a life. And there's a lot of Americans that did not want the country to industrialize, but it was just part of where the country went after this war. We had to start manufacturing on our own, and it just grew from there. So we started to kind of invest more into this system. Alright, we're going to take a look at some of the new factories that came up, and a lot of them started to start to come up in the New England area. And New England ended up being a really good place to set up factories because of the water that was necessary. They had lots of rivers up in that area because of transportation and location to the ocean, and in the New England area a lot of people were just willing to work. So a lot of the first factories were set up in New England, and a lot of the first factories were set up and they hired entire families to work for them. One of the first ones we'll talk about is spinning mill, which was started up by Samuel Slater, who built the first one in Rhode Island, and he hired children. Between the ages of about 7 and 12, he hired 8 of them, and he paid them a very, very low wage. And then later on, he built a larger mill and would hire whole families, mom, dad, and then the kids, and pay them low wages, and they'd work as a family. It was kind of like a family system of employment. And it spread throughout the whole New England area, this whole family system. Okay. Later on, 15, 20 years later, the industry started to get bigger and factories were getting larger, and a man by the name of Francis Lowell built our power looms, which were a more industrial size version of that spinning mill, where it would be able to spin raw cotton into yarn but also weave cloth on power looms. And he saw this over in England, and he kind of brought the style over here to the United States. And Samuel Slater did the same thing. He saw the styles over in England, and he brought them over here to the United States. So then they built a new one called the Lowell Mills. And the Lowell Mills is when he hired farm girls who would live in boarding houses and work for them 12 and a half hours a day, crazy noises, ridiculous conditions. At the early times, they were paid at high wages. They were supervised by older women, got to do some things in the outside. They would eventually marry, move on, but then later on, as the factories grew, more people started working there. Profits weren't, they were falling. The working conditions worsened for the girls, the wages went lower, and a lot of them stopped working and protested because of this. the power looms, just like the spinning mill, and many of the factories worked on water. They ran on water power. All right. So because of this, a lot of them were unable to be built away from rivers, so that, kept them from spreading certain places in the country. Okay, moving on from a couple of these factories to different types of things used in the manufacturing business, and just the way things were built and fixed and repaired. Eli Whitney, he did create the cotton gin, but also he demonstrated the use of what they call interchangeable parts. Interchangeable parts are parts that are exactly alike, and he was able to use, if you can see in the picture, all these parts and assemble a rifle or a musket in just seconds. Having these interchangeable parts really sped up production in the factories. It made repairs a lot easier, and allowed people to work at lower wages. It allowed less skilled workers to be able to work in these factories, but it also required a lot more management and people to oversee these workers. And a lot of these workers were not used to this supervision because they were used to working out in the fields where they were not supervised. So that became a problem for a lot of people, as well as being supervised. Alright, so we take a look at some of the factories and some of the things working in the factories. Let's take a look at some of our transportation that started to expand. And we've got Robert Fulton, who invented the steamboat. And so the steamboat could move against current or a strong wind, and this definitely improved our transportation system, allowing people to travel a lot more quickly, and get to places that it took a lot longer to get to. For instance, from New York to Albany, they were able to get there quicker because you were able to get on the steamboat. In 1811, we had our first steamship, which is a little bit different. What are you doing? No. No. Come on. You gotta go to bed.
No.
Yes.
What for?
It's night.
I don't want to be.
To see yourself as that, to be happy, healthy, successful in the long term. It promotes an extreme sort of self-focus.
Come on. Come on, I'm trying to work. After a while, though, there was another man who built a stronger, more powerful engine to make the transportation a lot more smoother and make it a little bit easier to travel back up the river. In 1837, Samuel Morse invented the telegraph, making communication a lot more easy to communicate with people long distance. You could communicate with people in different towns now. So the telegraph line started to span throughout the country. It was definitely used quite a bit in the Civil War. We will talk about that when we get there, how much the telegraph was used. But the telegraph, the steamship, the steamboat brought our nation a lot closer together because of the improved transportation and communication. And then the last part of technology that's kind of increasing is in our farm production. And we all know John Deere. Well, John Deere invented the lightweight plow in 1836. And so this made farming a lot easier. It improved agriculture. It definitely started making people start to move out farther in the Midwest because of these new inventions. It just started to link the different regions in the country. It just brought a sense of national unity. With new farm equipment, they were able to grow food in the Midwest, and with our new transportation system, we could transport it easier to the eastern part of the country. Communication, we could talk to the people now a little easier with the telegraph. So, however, there is going to be a negative to this, positive for some people, but negative for most. It will eventually cause a war, and that's the expansion of slavery because of the expansion of the fields and cotton. It's going to lead to the expansion of slavery, and that's what we'll talk more about tomorrow. Now, there is no homework for you tomorrow, if you're still on the same day. But I definitely would always review my notes. So there's no homework, but I would definitely review my notes.